Hey guys, it's time for another answer key. This week, we've done a couple of pretty heavy topics. The first one was coal mining children, and today I'm going to talk to you about the article that you read about the journey to the America, stories from immigrants. And I did post a virtual field trip to Ellis Island. Ellis Island, as we know, is the place that anybody that came from outside the United States had to pass through, and they had to determine if they were able to come into this country. And many of our relatives, including mine, came through Ellis Island, and it was not easy. It was not fun. It wasn't nice. There wasn't a red carpet with bottles of water. It was very hectic, and it was a challenge. So, and there were people that were turned away. I mean, that's the hard part. So, our skill this week has been comparing and like actually analyzing and comparing accounts from different people, but about the same topic. So, I'm going to quickly read through this and then we'll look at the answers. Okay? So, Journey to the Americas. In the late 1800s to the early 1900s, a large number of people immigrated from Europe to the United States. They had hopes for a better future. America had more job opportunities. Some people immigrated for religious freedom. Many immigrants arrived by steamship in New York. These are the accounts of immigrants that were later interviewed. So, this first person is Elda. Elda remembers the eye exam. Elda immigrated from Lucca, Italy at age 5 in 1916. When I got on the boat, I was only 5. The gentleman who had been back and forth several times, my mother took a liking to him because he was so knowledgeable about it. He spoke Italian, and so he took me on a walk one day and he said, "You know what? When you get over to Ellis Island, they're going to be examining your eyes with a hook." And he says, "Don't let them do it because you know what? They did it to me. One eye fell in my pocket. So you can imagine how I entered this. We get over there and everybody has to pass. I'm on the floor screaming. I passed without a physical. I passed the eye test because the other 7 passed." Now, do you think that they really did it with a hook, or was he scaring them? Or I'm curious. I wasn't there, but that makes me wonder more. Gertrude remembers changing her name. Gertrude immigrated from Germany in 1929 at age 9. Okay, my grandmother's family was directly from Germany, so this is a text to self connection that I have, and her family had to pass through. I was born Gudrun Hildebrandt and married Moeller, Mr. Moeller, who was from Denmark. He immigrated here many years later and we met in New York. However, when I started school in Chicago where I grew up, I couldn't speak a word of English, and I was the only child in the school that couldn't speak English. And, she laughs, it wasn't too happy the first couple of years, but my mama said, "Take heart, because someday you're going to be able to speak 2 languages, and all the ones that were teasing you will speak only one." I have a connection to today a lot of my children who have the privilege of speaking Spanish as their first language and learning English. It really is an advantage that you have to have 2 languages. And so, even way back in the 1920s and 30s, this was the sentiment when you came, and you have more than one way to communicate. That's an amazing skill. And it was true. She was always right. So my teacher suggested, since none of the children could pronounce Gudrun, which is an old Germanic Scandinavian name and a very beautiful name, she gave me a list of girls' names to choose from so that all the kids could converse. So I picked the name starting with a G, as with my name, and it was Gertrude. I'm not very happy with it, but it has stuck with me all of these years. Morris remembers the steamship. Morris immigrated from Poland in 1920 at age 10. When we got on the Rotterdam, we had a field day. One, I was never on a ship before, and I was absolutely awed by it. It was overwhelming. All the people and boarding the ship, it was all brand new experience. We left Rotterdam. We set sail in about half an hour after the ship started. My sister got very seasick. It took us 14 days to cross the Atlantic, and in the entire crossing she was in steerage. The only time she came up for a breath of fresh air was just about a half hour before we saw the Statue of Liberty. Now, the experience of the ship being young was an adventure in that particular situation because we were on the lowest level of the ship. We couldn't go aboard. Some kids were more adventurous. My brother and I, we could sneak aboard. We were always chased, and we saw some people who traveled maybe in first or second class, and we looked upon them as royalty, but We were confined primarily to steerage. Steerage was one huge place. It was the lowest deck, the stench. It was the summer in August, the humidity, the heat, having no air conditioning, having cooling facilities. It was very hot, compounded by the fact that there must have been anywhere from 200 to 300 people in that huge cavernous area. The body smells, the body odors, the lack of sanitation, meaning where do you go to the bathroom, the lack of any kind of facilities. Washing, there was no such thing as washing or bathing. The stench, the vermin, it was rat infested. Look at that context clue right there. If you didn't know what vermin was, they really tell you in the next part of the sentence that it was rat infested, so vermin must be rats and little critters. But being children, I guess, had its advantages in this case because we always tried to get out of there. We tried to get out of the steerage, get out of the babble of voices, get out of the heat and the stench, and get on the main deck. We all were permitted to stay there for a little while, but we were constantly chased. But the crossing went, for me in particular, very quickly. And guys, this is an actual photograph, which I really appreciate that's included. It's an immigrant family that arrived in New York. I mean, you see they had just what was on their back and in their little bags. Sadie Frown remembers her early days in New York City. Sadie immigrated from Poland at age 13. We came by steerage on a steamship in a very dark place that smelt dreadfully. There were hundreds of other people packed in with us, men, women, and children, and almost all of them were sick. It took us 12 days to cross the sea, and we thought we should die, but at last the voyage was over, and we came up and saw the beautiful bay, and the big woman with the spikes on her head, and the lamp that is lighted at night in her hand. Aunt Fanny and her husband met us at the gate of this country, and were very good to us, and soon I had a place to live. Out, domestic servant, which is like a maid, while my mother got work in a factory making white goods. I was only a little over 13 years of age, and a greenhorn, so I received $9 a month. Do you hear that, guys? $9 a month. And board and lodging, which I thought was doing well. Mother, who, as I have said, was very clever, made $9 a week on white goods, which means all sorts of underclothing and high-class work. Okay, caption. Sadie would have seen a sight similar to this aboard the steamship she came to America on. How amazing is it that we have these pieces of history captured with an actual photograph? Do you see the Statue of Liberty really far in the distance? So imagine if we didn't have this. Like when we talk about Native American cultures and we talk about some of the way back, like the Ice Age, things like that, we don't have photographs. We have people's illustrations that they've taken information and they've interpreted into illustrations, but the power of seeing these illustrations just really drives it home. Could you imagine? I mean, this kid Morris was your age. Could you imagine being a fifth grader and going through this? And then Sadie, she's 13. She's that middle schooler, not far from my daughter's age. I just can't even imagine making this journey. So let's talk about answers. They're in these boxes. It's kind of a suggested answer, but this chart wants you to fill out the chart to show the main point of each child's recollection of immigrating to America. And again, I can look at your stuff, but I want to show you what would be exemplary responses. So Elda is frightened of the Ellis Island eye exam when immigrated. So she has terror because some guy told her you had to have your eye looked at with a hook. Gertrude started school in Chicago and was the only child who couldn't speak English. So she thinks about coming here and getting there. Elda, we stop hearing about her until she faints and gets approved. Morris recounts his adventure aboard a steamship while immigrating to New York City. So his is on the boat. And Sadie recounts her journey to New York and her early days living as an immigrant in New York. And I can already see that Gertrude and Sadie went as far as to talk about once they got here. So there's a comparison. Number 2, which sentence from Elda's account best shows her point of view on going through inspections at Ellis Island? So basically, this is the little girl who was literally, I'm on the floor screaming. She's A. Number 3, how is Morris's account similar to Sadie's account? Well, both Morris and Sadie recount their experiences aboard the steamships. So Morris and Sadie were on the ship, and that's where they had the bulk of their experience, their account. Number 4, the table has sentences from Mary Barrett's testimony and Patience Kershaw's testimony. we talked about these people with the never mind. I'm so sorry. I got distracted. I had a message. I apologize. Let me continue. So Gertrude and Sadie. Gertrude says, I couldn't speak a word of English, and I was the only child in the school that couldn't speak English. And she laughs. It wasn't too happy the first couple of years. So I know some students that have come straight from Mexico that they couldn't speak much English, and it wasn't very fun for them until they could start figuring out what was going on around them. It had to be hard. Sadie's account. I was only a little over 13 years of age and a greenhorn, so I received $9 a month and board and lodging, which I thought was doing well. So what's one way they're different? Well, Gertrude's talking about starting school, can't speak English, so at least she got to go to school. Sadie, was school age, but she didn't get to go to school. So she talks about how she had to earn money. So Gertrude and Sadie, even though they were both immigrants, they both had very different experiences when they got here. And number 5, how might a reader benefit from reading each of the 4 different accounts of children immigrating to America? Bottom line, guys, is as you read different accounts, each child recalls a different experience, and it just adds to the whole picture of the experience. We don't have a time machine. We can't go back, but we can rely on firsthand accounts of people that were there and use our imaginations and watch documentaries and things like that. So in this, I would have just given an example from each kid. Poor little Elda's screaming on the floor, passing out, and it was a rumor. Morris was on the steamship, and he had adventures and the stench, and boy, I can't imagine the smell of that, and then Sadie and Morris were pretty similar, okay? So as long as you put some details, this would be an exemplary paragraph. So I do hope this helps. I hope that you're doing well. We are not doing Pearl Harbor, excuse me. I hope this helps, and I hope you're doing well. I hope you're getting some learning in. I know this isn't ideal, but hopefully this is better than nothing. So until next time, my friends, take care.